appearance of the former Hawks boss in KwaZulu-Natal, Johan Booysen, at the state capture inquiry. But for more on this now, let us cross live to our SABC reporter Manqoba Mchunu, who's been monitoring the event for us. Manqoba, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming through. Just before we dwell a little deeper into Booysen's testimony today, let's just talk about the concern really raised by Justice Raymond Zondo over the capture of the law enforcement agencies.
Well, certainly we heard the judge also alluding to that fact at the beginning of the commission, saying that really this commission was delving into the issue of how some of those law enforcement agencies had been captured, and saying that, of course, as the commission, they'll give anybody a fair chance to come and make their representations here at the commission. He says that it really was a worrying picture to hear of some of the things that had happened during this so-called capture period, where policemen, those who were contempt on fighting corruption, were either targeted, ostracized, and also criminal charges initiated against them, which he says is really a worrying picture if that was the picture so far as the evidence that he's listened to, not only from Booysen himself, but also from the likes of the former IPID boss, Robert Bride, who also testified to similar testimony of how some of those police members who were investigating these serious corruption cases had been targeted, and how most of them had ended up facing counter charges for being involved in that, which he says is a pretty worrying picture. And therefore he says he welcomes more testimony in this, and that he hopes that there will be more evidence that will be led with regards to alleged capture of these law enforcement agencies.
Now, on to Johan Booysen's testimony today. Really a lot came out of that particular testimony, from his visit to the Saxon World, to the Gupta family residence, and his meeting with former President Jacob Zuma's son, Duduzane Zuma.
Indeed, Palisa, we did hear of how Duduzane had introduced Booysen to the Gupta brothers. In fact, one of the Gupta brothers, Tony Gupta, in 2015. Of course, he said that he had held several meetings with Duduzane Zuma, on which ultimately, on the last meeting, they met in Johannesburg at Sandton, where then Duduzane Zuma had asked him to come in his car, and they then drove to the Gupta compound in Saxonwold. He says that during that meeting, he had been introduced to Tony Gupta, who then made comments to him about him being shortlisted to head up the Hawks. You recall that Booysen had been one of the candidates who were shortlisted to be the national Hawks boss after General Kemeza was removed. And of course, saying that, of course, after that, he was pretty surprised that Tony Gupta would raise this issue, because at that point, that issue was not known. It was not an issue that was in the public fore. And so he says that he found that to be very strange. But he says nothing much came out of that meeting. In fact, he says that the only utterance that he made about this is that one day, if he does in fact become the head of the Hawks, he would like to have or to eat curry with him in Durban. So he says no promises were made, and there was no pressure, or there were no favors that were granted with regards to that. And he says that in this meeting, Duduzane Zuma didn't participate at all. He just sat there quietly and didn't say a thing. So he says the inference that he got from this meeting is that if at all he was appointed as head of the Hawks, he says that he understands by what Tony Gupta was saying is at the time is that he would have wanted Tony Gupta to see him as being the one who helped him to get that post.
Just a final one here, Manqoba. The allegations really against Richard Mdluli, that he allegedly started looting the Secret Service account with former Police Minister Nathi Mthethwa benefiting. Talk to us about what Booysen said about this. Manqoba? All right, it looks like we've lost sound to our reporter there, Manqoba Mchunu, live from Parktown, where the state capture inquiry was currently sitting, where the former KwaZulu-Natal Hawks boss, Johan Booysen, was giving testimony. So part of what Booysen said today was in relation to the appointment of Richard Mdluli as the head of crime intelligence, saying that it was irregular, and saying that Mdluli allegedly started looting the Secret Service account with the former police minister Nathi Mthethwa allegedly benefiting. But we'll get more on that from our reporter a little later on here on the SABC News.